Hi everyone! This video is going to be a little bit different than usual. It comes in two halves. Now the first half is going to be me showing you how I colour with Copic markers. I've got several different blends going on here and I'm going to show you how to transition from a dark to a light colour seamlessly. The second half of the video is going to be a speed colouring of the rest of this image whilst I talk to you about my mental health. Now if you've watched this channel for a while, you'll know that I have my own struggles with mental health and it is indeed the reason why I colour. And I think it's really important, especially in these times of coronavirus, that we all look after our mental health and that we open up the conversation around it so that it's not stigmatised, it's not taboo, and people feel less alone. So the second half of this video is going to be me talking about my mental health a little bit more in depth, well, a lot more in depth actually than I have in the past. I'm really going to put it all out there and it is quite nerve-wracking, but as I said, I think it's really important to be an open book if you can and get those conversations going so that everybody knows that they're not alone in what they're feeling. Everybody goes through difficult times in their life and it's important to know that you can come out the other side of it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, the reason why this video has come about is, well, I've wanted to do something that focused on mental health specifically for quite a while because that is what this channel is all about. That's where it stemmed from. But Cult Pens asked me if I would design the banner for this week's Panorama newsletter that they send out by email, and they wanted me to keep colouring and mental health in mind. So this is what I came up with. I drew and coloured all of this by hand. Then my brother helped me digitally put it into letters and yeah, this is how it's turned out. So I'm really pleased with the end result. I hope Cult Pens are too. Obviously I've put the brain in there with the love heart just to show that you need to take care of your mental health and yeah, like I said, I'm really pleased with how it's turned out and very honoured to be asked to do that. Now the Copics that I am focusing on today are ones that I've collected in blends. So I don't have enough money to buy all of those big Copic sets as much as I would love them. I buy them kind of one at a time and collect them that way. So what I do is I tend to keep it within blended families. So I'll buy one light, one medium and one dark and sort of go through it that way. It's a lot cheaper, obviously, to buy them that way. But there are offers on all the time. Cult Pens currently have an offer, 15% off all of their Copic markers. So like I said, it's just easier sometimes to collect them that way. And you can create your own sets rather than having maybe a handful of colours that you'll never use. So yeah, I prefer to do it this way. But you know, if there's a millionaire out there watching this who wants to buy me the whole set, I'm not going to stop you. Okay, so I chose this illustration here. As you can see, it says I am enough. And it's very much a self-care, mental health kind of illustration. I'll leave the link in the description of where I bought this from and downloaded it so that you can have it too if you wish. So we'll get started. I've chosen just a few different colours to try and keep it cohesive and not all over the place with different colours. I've got a bunch of greens, yellows, blues and reds, as you can see. And first of all, I'm just going to be showing you how I create the blends. So let's start off with the greens. Let's do a leaf first of all. So as I said before, I've got a light, a medium and a darker shade. The ones that I'm using, they're a mixture of Sketch and Chow Copics, as you can see. The ones I'm using are YG23 New Leaf, YG03 Yellow Green and YG00 Mimosa Yellow. So they're the greens that I've chosen. It's a really beautiful bright green, and if you want me to do a future video on all of the different blends that I have in my collection and the colours that go together nicely, I can definitely do that. Just let me know in the comments. So I'm going to uncap them all first because I find that alcohol markers work best when they're wet and you have to be quite quick with them. So I uncap them all first and that means I can just grab them really quickly and go into the blends quicker. So I start off with the darker colour. You don't have to do that. You can put a whole light base down first and then layer up the darker colours, but this is just how I do it. So I've got the darkest green, which is the YG23, and I'm going to start at the bottom of this section of the leaf here and we're going to go lighter as we get to the top, and we'll do it in sections. So I just start off putting a base layer down, and as you can see, the gorgeous brush just goes straight over the paper. I then pick up the YG03, which is the next colour that's going to transition, and again I'm just using these little rounded motions to lay down the colour. Then we've got the lightest, which is the YG00, and I'm going over the line It's very, very similar to how you colour with pencils actually, because you just go over the line to make sure that it blends. And these pens are just brilliant blenders anyway, they don't really need a lot of effort, but as you can see, you get a really, really nice blend from dark to light. Now what I usually do is I go back in and start again with the darkest colour, because as you layer them, they do become darker and more saturated until the paper is absolutely wet with colour. And this enables you to just blend them a little bit nicer. So next colour, and then finally the lightest. And as you can see, it looks absolutely beautiful. So we're going to do that whole leaf and do exactly the same thing again, and you'll see how fast this is compared to pencils. So there we go with our darkest green, medium green, and lighter green. And as these dry, you will notice that the blend becomes even smoother. Sometimes it can look a bit disjointed and blocky as you're doing it, but as they dry, they tend to smooth out a little bit more. So just again, going in with that darkest shade and basically doing the same thing all over again. And 2 layers is usually enough. Now obviously it depends on which paper you're using, that's really, really important. I'm using a bleed proof paper here. When I say bleed proof, it doesn't stop it from going through to the other side, but it does prevent it from going out of the lines as much as it would on standard paper. You can see it's gone out of the lines a bit here, but I'm not worried about that at all. But yeah, it does depend on what kind of paper you use of what results you'll get with these pens. So just going in again. And it is a good idea to try and keep away from the edges if you can, because they do spread, but you can actually push colour back in with the colourless blender, which I might even try and show you with that little bit there that's come out. So try not to stay in one place for too long, because that will also make the alcohol ink spread outwards. And then before you know it, you've got a leaf coloured, a big leaf. So it is a lot quicker than pencils, which is why a lot of people prefer markers. So I'll just grab one of those colourless blenders. It looks like this, it's number 0. And all you do is you just grab it and just hold it right at the area where the ink has come out of the line. And it will disappear it basically. As you can see, it's gone. So yeah, good tip there. If you go out of the lines with your alcohol markers, just use a colourless blender to push it back in. Okay, let's cap these back up and then we can do another blend, making sure the caps are going on the right pens. Okay, next up, let's do a flower. So let's go with the reds. So I've got 4 different ones here because I've got a really super light one. And the first one that I'm starting off with is the R29, and this is called Lipstick Red. So let's go for this flower here next to the leaf. Again, I'm going to start in the inner corner of the petal and just do little rounded motions like that, not keeping the pen on the paper for too long. Then I've got this one, R24, which is Prawn, and this one blends beautifully in with the previous one. Again, if you just kind of take your time going over that line, you'll get a better blend. This one is the R22 Light Prawn, so obviously it's going to go beautifully with the prawn. And then finally we have the lightest shade, which is R12 Light Tea Rose. So I'm popping that on there, and then I'm just working this line a little bit to make sure that the alcohol ink blends. And I will go in again with all of the colours, just as I did on the leaf, to deepen it up and make sure that that blend is as smooth as we can possibly get it. Should have uncapped them all again, really. Like I said, you have to work quite quickly with these, otherwise you can end up with lines. So there we go. That is a gorgeous blend. So let's do something blue. Now for this one, I'm actually missing a colour. I would have preferred to go from B06 to B04, but I've got to skip it because I don't have it. So B06 to B01, and then I've got B00 and B000. So these kind of all go in a line, but you could do with some in-between shades just to make those blends a little bit easier to do. However, it can be done. So here I've got B06, which is Peacock Blue. And as you can see, I'm doing exactly the same technique. In fact, why don't we do it this way this time? So I'm going to start with the dark at the top and the bottom of the petal. Then the next one is the B01, which is Mint Blue. Now, as I said, I would have preferred to maybe have a B04 as the next colour, just to make the transition a little bit easier, because you can see these are completely different shades. But as I say, it can be done. It just might not look as smooth as some of the others. And then the next one is the B00, which is a really, really light blue. And then finally, the B000, which is the lightest. I'll use that as the centre colour. There we go. So I'll just go over it again one more time. Darken up those tips. Kind of brush the ink out a little bit. And there we go. Not too bad at all, is it? Now the last one that I've got is the yellows. So I'm using Y18 Lightning Yellow, Y13 Lemon Yellow, and Y00 Barium Yellow. So for this one, let's do this flower over here. Exactly the same technique. It's super, super easy. It's very, very quick, as you can see. And these yellows go perfectly together. Like I said, I've got a few different blend groups that I have in my collection, so I'm more than happy to do a video on blends for Copic markers, because I know how difficult it is to know which numbers and which colours to choose when you're building up your sets. So yeah, like I said, I like to do it in little families. But really, it depends on what you're colouring. If you're colouring a lot of flowers, you want a lot of bright colours. If you're colouring landscapes and things, you might want more deep earthy tones. So really, it is very personal on which colours you decide to choose. So now it's time for my story about struggling with poor mental health. I guess I should put a trigger warning here, because I'd hate for anyone to be adversely affected by anything I say. So general triggers for poor mental health, feeling out of control, suicidal thoughts, health anxiety and depressive episodes. My mental health problems have to do with gastrointestinal issues, emetophobia and physical health. So as much as I'll try and keep detail from getting too gross, there will be mentions of that. Basically, if any of that triggers or concerns you, I'd say better safe than sorry and just don't listen to the rest of the video. I know how easy it can be for other people's problems to bleed into your own health and affect your state of mind, so just take care of yourself. Okay, so my story starts when I was 17 years old. I'd just had a baby, which is a huge thing for anyone, but at that age even more so. There was a lot of discord in the family, but I love my son to bits. Honestly, he was and is the light of my life, and my youngest son too, of course. I truly think I was made to be a mum. I'm very maternal, and I've always had younger siblings under my wing growing up, so despite it being scary at first, of course it was, I was in a really good place headwise with this little boy who I knew that I would love and who would love me no matter what happened in life. So one day I'm doing a car boot, which, if you don't know what that is, it's something really common in the UK where you pack up your car with any items you want to sell, and you go to this massive field with loads of cars in rows. You unload your stuff like a yard sale, and people will walk up and down and buy your stuff. It usually happens on Sundays, and for some ungodly reason, the general rule is that you have to be there at like 6 in the morning to start unloading and selling. It's ridiculous. So I've always had problems with early starts, and when I say problems, I don't just mean I feel a bit tired in the morning. For some reason, I still don't know why, I feel utterly dreadful before about 9 a.m. I feel sick to my stomach, it's just horrible. I remember being on the school bus actually and just trying to keep a lid on my stomach because I felt so sick, so it stemmed back quite a long time. So here I am at this car boot, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm feeling pretty sick, but I'm okay at that point. I think my son had a sleepover at his grandma's the previous night, so it was just me and my boyfriend. We unloaded the car and we got everything set up to sell on tables, and my boyfriend decided he wanted to go and have a look around. So I'm there on my own, manning the stall. A lot more buyers are starting to trickle in and it's getting quite busy. When out of nowhere, and I mean 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, my gut just twists like wringing a dishcloth and I almost collapse. Now again, I don't want to get too graphic, but it was clear to me instantly that I needed the bathroom. Problem is, I'm on the stall on my own and I can't leave it because all of our stuff is just there for the taking. Now I can't remember if I tried calling my boyfriend or whether he even had his phone on him at the time. This was 2006 and you didn't always have a phone glued to your hand like nowadays. Either way, there was no way of getting hold of him to come back and take over. The field was massive, there were so many cars and people, he could have been anywhere in the crowd. So I started to panic. In my head, all I could think of was how I was desperate for the loo but totally stuck. I started feeling sweaty and the panic was obviously exacerbating the stomachache, so I thought I was going to be sick. And it was just horrible, as you can imagine. After a minute or two, I went over to the stall next to ours and asked the seller if they wouldn't mind keeping an eye on my stall whilst I nipped to the loo. All of this done with a mask of indifference, like it was just a quick favour and nothing horrendous like the turmoil I was in inside. So off I go in search of this portable toilet that's the only facility they have at these car boots. It really is a very basic affair. A field, cars and a portaloo. Now again, I'm not going to go into it, but let's just imagine a toilet in the most disgusting state you've ever seen and times it by 10. Then you'd have an idea of what I was faced with when I opened that door. All in all, it was a pretty dire 10 minutes of my life. So I get back to the car eventually and my boyfriend's already back. I tell him I needed the loo and that's it. I don't tell him how I almost had a breakdown and how I was feeling almost traumatised by it, and that goes on for months and months that he doesn't know. I can't get the situation out of my head, needing the loo, not being able to go. Now, for anyone else, they might just say, yep, that was horrible, but it's done now, back to normal, don't think twice about it. For some reason, my brain was like a stuck record and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I thought about all the other situations where you might not be able to get to a toilet. In the supermarket, car journeys, stuck in traffic, buckled into roller coasters at the fair, having driving lessons, literally every scenario where you might be trapped or not be close to a toilet. Very rapidly it started taking over my life. I think it was about 2 years that I barely left the house. Found it difficult to go to the local shop even, because as soon as I get in the car you can guarantee my gut would twist up, you could put your money on it. Clearly at that stage there was a huge psychological element to the problem, and although I did and still do suffer with IBS and it is a very real physical thing, a lot of it was stemming from the constant fixation that my brain was in. Now, as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, having basically no life because of a continence issue is obviously going to have a detrimental effect on your mental health, and boy, did it. I felt like a freak, like an old woman, like a crazy person, like an idiot who just needed to get over it. A bad mum because I couldn't take my son very far away from the house. A bad daughter because I couldn't visit my dad who lived hours away. A bad girlfriend because my boyfriend didn't sign up for this, and who wants a partner who's scared to go anywhere and all they can think about is the bowel? I was useless, boring, too worrisome, too negative, not worth the effort. Any derogatory thing you can think about your self-worth as a person, I felt it, and still today my self-esteem is shockingly low. I tried loads of different things to snap out of it. Medications for the gut, almost got addicted to taking Imodium at one stage because I didn't feel like I could go out without it. Tried hypnotherapy and something called neuro-linguistic programming, which tries to divert how you think about things. Acupuncture, you name it, I tried it. I was 20 when I had my second son, and again, incredibly happy to have another baby, but he was a challenge. He would cry all day and night, never be content, always grizzly or upset, and I don't just mean for the first few months like any baby, it was years. It was a completely different experience to my first child. They were just like chalk and cheese. But years later we found out he was autistic, which went a long way to explaining why he was so discontent. So obviously that was a lot of stress to be under, as well as bringing up a 3-year-old, maintaining a relationship which was now a marriage, and struggling with my brain, which I obsessively wished I could just turn off for a day or swap with someone normal for a bit of relief from the constant vigilance and inspection of how my gut was feeling every time I stepped out the door. It was around this time I caught the norovirus. Now, if you don't know, norovirus is like sickness and diarrhea on steroids. It is something else. You feel so incredibly, undescribably ill. You just want to die to stop feeling that way. If God came down and asked if you wanted to end it, you'd be at those pearly gates so fast his head would spin. I'd never experienced nausea to that degree before. You can barely move, but at the same time you're projectiling from both ends. It's just horrific. And a couple of months later I caught it again. Now, just like with the car boot, how awful I'd felt during the illness got my brain stuck again, and it was all I could think about. Because noro comes on very suddenly, like you're feeling perfect at 5 o'clock and at 5:01 it's like that scene from The Exorcist, there is no warning. I started to think about what would happen if it came on when I was out. How the hell would I cope when I couldn't even cope with it at home? Every scenario you can imagine about getting ill played on my mind like a loop, all day long for months and months. Again, I became too afraid to go out. If I started feeling even the slightest bit sick, I'd panic and end up on the bathroom floor immobile until the feeling passed. It started to get to the point where I just didn't want to carry on living like that. I'd just had enough of all the constant turmoil. I hadn't had a break from it for years. And I've got to point out it was nothing to do with my husband or kids. They were all brilliant and they kept me going. It was purely the struggle that was going on in my own head with the quality of life, or lack of, that I was experiencing. The lowest point was when I started thinking about the train bridge that was a 2-minute walk from my house and how quickly I could just end it. I don't think I could ever actually commit suicide. It would terrify me to even try. But the thoughts were there and I knew that I needed help somehow. So it was one of those days where I felt sick all of a sudden and I was convinced the noro was back. I was so frightened that I was getting noro again. I was asking for an ambulance. I was in a total panic attack mode and my husband drove me straight to the doctors. They said I had to sit and wait, but I can't describe to you the discomfort I was in. I couldn't settle. I just wanted to get on my bathroom floor and die. So I ended up walking out of the doctors. The GP called me later and I basically broke down on the phone to him and spilled everything. He got me in straight away and prescribed me with an antidepressant and an antiemetic tablet that I could take for peace of mind whenever I started feeling sick. I still take the antidepressant to this day. I still carry the anti-sickness tablets with me. It's been 12 years. He also got me into a CBT program, which helped to an extent, but the problem was I was never in any doubt that what I was feeling was irrational. I could explain every minutiae of it to you and tell you how stupid it was and how I knew it was psychological. I understood all that. Without wanting to sound big-headed, sometimes I wished that I wasn't clever enough to fully comprehend the workings of my brain when it comes to the phobias and the panic and the anxiety. I think sometimes ignorance is bliss, and if someone tells you this will definitely work, you can just simply believe it, whereas I would always have an answer for everything he was saying, why it wouldn't work, because, well, what about this? And so on. So CBT didn't really help, but I guess the antidepressant did something because I started to feel like my head was above water for the first time. I wasn't back to normal by any means. I felt like that swan that's kicking madly underwater to stay afloat, but it sort of numbed me a bit. I wasn't feeling too deeply about anything, good or bad. I wasn't having huge breakdowns and panic attacks, but neither was I feeling incredible joy or excitement over anything. I'm still like that now, really. It's like there's a veil that's between me and feeling too much of anything. But it's definitely preferable to how I was before. And aside from one blip a couple of years ago where I seemed to be regressing and had to go on a higher dose, at this stage in my life I'm coping quite well. Now, of course, I've said that, so my brain tells me something else will happen pretty soon to bring me down, because every time I've tried to think positive in my life, you can bet your bottom dollar something happens to knock me back down again. But I still monitor my stomach every time I go out. Any micro changes in how I'm feeling are instantly analysed to see if they're enough of a threat to get me panicking. It's just how I live now. One of my biggest dreams came true this year because we finally managed to get a motorhome. Now, this is something I used to wish for at my lowest points, because I could see and do so much more with my life if I had a toilet and somewhere to lie down everywhere I go. That constant fist of fear that's clenched around my middle would finally lose its grip and I'd have a life again. Obviously, COVID's put paid to going anywhere for now, but I can't wait to be able to just get in a vehicle and set off without worrying about how long the journey will take, where the nearest toilets are, what would happen if we're stuck in traffic, what would happen if I felt so sick I needed to get on the floor, what if I have to go home and ruin everyone else's time. So it's going to be so good for us as a family. I guess you can see now why our holiday to Scotland last year was such an achievement for me, as well as coming down to Bath to meet some of you, because that was in a normal car and I actually managed it without freaking out or getting ill. So where does colouring come into all of this? Well, it was around the time my boys were 6 and 3. My husband had to go to the hospital early for a procedure and I was up with the kids facing a day completely on our own. I already felt queasy because it was early. But then it dawned on me that if I suddenly got noro, because it comes on out of nowhere, like I said, how could I look after the kids? I had a toddler and another one not much older, and of course they needed constant supervision and care, but remembering how I was when I was ill, I knew that I wouldn't be able to look after them, so of course I started panicking. The kids were watching TV, completely none the wiser as I sat next to them normally, but inside the anxiety was rapidly beginning to build. Now, for some reason, I always need to get on the floor when I'm feeling sick or panicky. I think the cold hardness of it grounds me or something, I don't really know, but it's the only place I want to be. So I'm lying on the hardwood floor of the living room, the kids are wandering around playing, watching TV, lying down with me, getting up, playing with toys. I desperately needed to get out of my head and get a lid on my thoughts because I feel stripped back to basics when I'm like that. It's like the fight or flight feeling that they say happens when you have a panic attack. All rational thought disappears and you just want to either freak out or escape it somehow. So there were toys all over, you know what it's like with little kids, and right next to me on the floor was one of the boys' colouring books. I slid it over and with my head still on the floor started filling in the spaces with colour. I was determined to focus only on filling in each section at a time, and it took me out of my head enough that I was able to cut the panic attack off. It literally took me out of my thinking. And you know what, after that I didn't even put it together. I can be really dense sometimes. I didn't link the colouring with my panic stopping. It wasn't until 2015, when adult colouring became a thing that you do for mental health, that I remembered how colouring in my kids' book that day had helped to derail the panic I was going into. And that's the whole reason why I have this channel, because if something as basic and simple as colouring can help someone out of their head for a little while, it's just invaluable. And if I can help by making review videos and little tutorials to further your skills and keep this hobby interesting, that is such a fulfilling thing for me personally, that you're helping me as much as I'm helping you. So even though that's just the shortened version of my story, would you believe, I hope it's gone some way to explaining what I've been through, why I do this, and how valuable a tool colouring is for mental health. And that no matter how low you feel, there is always hope. Sometimes it's not easy to find, and people will ridicule you, they won't understand, they'll brush you off, and you'll feel like you're shit, that no one cares enough to help. But there are people out there like that GP who hauled me in and got me on a brighter path than the very dark one I was on. And if any of you ever need someone to talk to, I will always be here. I might not have the perfect advice, I might not always know what to say or how to help, but I am here to listen and comfort you if I can. As long as everyone who watches my videos knows that they always have someone to turn to for a chat, that could be enough. You are enough, just as you are. It can be very difficult to believe that sometimes, honestly, I know, and I still struggle. But you have to be as kind to yourself as you would be to a loved one who felt the same way. Anyway, I hope you got to know me a bit more with this video, and I'm so glad to open up a conversation around mental health because it's talked about, but it's not talked about enough. So I hope it will inspire others in the community to talk about their struggles and just get everyone talking about this because it's such a huge issue and it needs to be voiced at every opportunity to normalise it for those that are keeping everything inside and feeling so alone in this. I'm putting some helplines in the description below, just in case you do want to talk to someone who's trained to help. But my inbox is always open too if you just want a friendly chat about the weather or something inane to get your mind off bigger problems. Thank you so much for watching and listening more than ever, and I'll see you soon on Colour with Claire.